Good morning. The would-be public speaker finds guidance in the Talmud, Poischin b'kavod echsanya, open by honoring the host. It would be remiss not to begin by publicly acknowledging the tremendous effort that an event of this magnitude requires from the organizers, volunteers, and sponsors. What makes this event unique, however, is the tremendous care that Joanna and her team put in as well. From the initial email telling me that you're going to London, it was exceedingly obvious that everyone is fully invested in making PHP UK truly a special event. Friends, I think you're in for a real treat. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this very special way. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm humbled, and you have my appreciation. The Talmud observes, Ein melech bli am. A sovereign does not rule without a populace. Now, while I would be the last to compare a public speaker to a king, the fact of the matter is that without an audience, I'm just a guy up here talking to himself. So I'd like to thank each of you for joining me this morning and entrusting me with your time and your attention. For those of you who may not know me, as Joanna said, my name's Yitzchock Willroth. But if it's easier for you, you can call me just Yitz. I've found that that tends to keep me drier. You might be more familiar with me as Code Rabbi, for I spend all too much time in all of the obvious places on the internet hiding behind this guy. I build stuff, and in the past few years, I've been fortunate enough that others have asked me to help them build stuff. But it wasn't always this way. Software development is actually my third career. Following college, I found myself running the hamster wheel of corporate America, where I worked for this guy. And that continued somewhat predictably for several years until one day I decided that I was spiritually impoverished. I promptly resigned, sold everything I owned. I had a massive garage sale. I moved to Jerusalem, and I enrolled in a yeshiva, a traditional Talmudic academy, Rabbinical school, where I began working for this guy. Now, in case you're vague at this point about the Talmud is the written record of the conversations of the ancient sages, serving as the primary repository for the law, legend, and lore of the Jewish people. And it's the essential focus of rabbinic scholarship. As for me, ultimately I returned to America, and I was fortunate enough to spend over a decade in full-time Talmud study until I came to the slow realization that I was financially impoverished. Now, a computer had been part of my life since my mother sent me to a college for kids program at a local business school when I was 8, where I learned rudimentary basic programming on the TRS-80 Model 1. So faced with the prospect of leaving rabbinical school, and really with little in the way of options, I made the decision to begin working for this guy as a software developer. Now, I have to tell you about this guy. Working for him is not so simple. High expectations, limited background, no formal training, and perhaps worst of all, beginning in my 30s, squarely behind the financial 8-ball, zero margin for error. Now, almost immediately, I recognized parallels between software development and Talmudic study. The Talmud describes rabbinic analysis as mevin davar mitoich davar, understanding one thing from within another, teasing out abstractions from concretions. Both disciplines are highly analytic in nature, yet also possess an undeniable creative component as well. Both require extended periods with high cognitive load, and often an incredible ability to maintain context. Interestingly, I also found that both are vocations whose practitioners also pursue them as vacations. You'll very often see someone come home after a long day at toiling in their craft, only to relax by engaging in an activity very, very similar to that which consumed their day. Now, recognizing these similarities when faced with challenges as a growing software developer, my instinct was to look to the insights and experiences that I had gained in rabbinical school for guidance. Now, perhaps surprisingly, I found that the analogy between the disciplines, it was more than merely superficial. That the wisdom of the sages could be readily translated into relevant and practical advice for the software developer. Ultimately, I found what serves as the title for our conversation this morning. That everything that I really needed to know, I learned in rabbinical school. Now, if you're wondering at this point, and fair enough, what to expect this morning, our session is primarily about advice. After all, why else do you visit the rabbi? In the next 30 minutes, I hope to share with you my experiences, the wisdom of the sages as I've been able to apply it to grow as a software developer. What the Talmud calls yayin yoshon b'kankan chadashim, aged wine in new flasks. Classic wisdom, but with novel application. Let's begin, shall we? The sage Yeshua ben Prachia advises, Aseh lecha rav, v'kana lecha chaver. Cultivate for yourself a mentor. Acquire for yourself a colleague. The wisdom of the sage's advice and its application to the challenges we face should be evident. Our growth as software developers is a journey. And what journey isn't enhanced by the counsel of a wizened guide and the fellowship of trusted companions? Cultivate for yourself a mentor. We work in an industry where the domain knowledge required to function at a high level is so vast and so fast changing that a Gladwellian 10,000 hours approach to its acquisition, it isn't merely inefficient, it's impossible. I mean, really, who has time for that? The single most effective way to accelerate that learning curve is to receive meaningful, timely, and personal guidance from someone who has trod that path before. Young craftsmen, they learn from journeymen. Doctors, they serve as interns for many years before practicing on their own. And this next one gets me every time. Professional golfers even have swing coaches. Why should our discipline be any different? Fortunately, in our community, we do have an incredible resource which connects willing mentors with potential apprentices. phpmentoring.org. I've taken advantage of the initiative twice as an apprentice, and both were very powerful experiences, which made an immediate and measurable impact on my proficiency as a developer. And now, a few years later, looking back, accelerated my growth tremendously. Note, however, the language cultivate a mentor. Know that the very best mentors, like Yoda here, they aren't always openly looking to take on an apprentice, likely because they understand the tremendous commitment involved, taking partial responsibility for the growth and success of another. The incredible irony, though, is that the same appreciation for the weight of the undertaking that makes them reluctant is also what makes their mentorship so valuable. The simple recipe for mentor cultivation involves just 3 steps. Identify potential mentors. Interact and grow your relationship with them. And take initiative. Identify, interact, initiate. In all likelihood, you already have relationships with potential mentors. A seasoned teammate, someone who you know at your local user group or have worked with on an open source project, someone you perhaps met at a conference. Once you've identified them, grow your interaction with them. Chat them up. Ask them questions. Do it again, and then do it again. Once you've established a history of going to them for advice, this is the tricky part. You have to extend yourself. Ask them if they'd consider formalizing the relationship. Yeah, it takes courage, but you would be amazed at how frequently it's successful. That language, cultivate a mentor, it also implies that a mentoring relationship need not be formal, nor does it need to be exclusive. I'm constantly cultivating ad hoc mentors for myself, always on the lookout for people that have the knowledge and the disposition to serve as personal subject matter experts that I can call on if I need guidance in a particular area. Most of them, they're not even aware of it, but they're stored in my mental Rolodex of who to call in case of an emergency. There are quite a few in this room right now. My friend Gary Hocken recently tweeted this about his interaction with Marco Prevetta over some questions that he had regarding doctrine. The amazing thing here, it's not that Marco gave Gary 30 minutes of his time just because Gary asked. No, you'll quickly learn that that's the rule rather than the exception with members of the open source community. The amazing part is that Gary asked. Yeah, Gary gets it. The value of a mentor, even a mentor for a minute, is immeasurable. So whether you apprentice yourself formally, either via phpmentoring.org or the old-fashioned way, or you cultivate fields of ad hoc mentors, they're not mutually exclusive. I suggest you do both. The primary takeaway is that there are people out there who are able, and in far more cases than you think, willing, many times very, very willing, to help you accelerate your growth as a software developer. It's simply negligent not to take advantage of them. Acquire for yourself a colleague. The pairing of this advice with that of cultivating a mentor is significant. It means that the key takeaway from the sage's direction is to view people as your most important resources. Now that's perhaps more obvious in the case of a mentor, but we mustn't underestimate the value of strong relationships and meaningful interactions with our fellow developers in terms of advancing our personal growth. One way that this can manifest is via pair coding. Yeah. The technical benefits of pair programming aside, the opportunity to mind meld with another developer over an implementation is incredibly, incredibly powerful. To experience firsthand and in real time how another developer analyzes a problem, breaks it into manageable parts, the decisions and trade-offs that they make when implementing a solution. The benefit of this sort of direct cross-pollination is immeasurable. Whether it's a new algorithm, a debugging technique, maybe an expanded naming vocabulary, even helpful keyboard shortcuts for your IDE. It's difficult to pair at any level and not walk away from the experience having integrated something new and valuable into your practice. Now, the most obvious place to pair code remains the workplace. Everyone is in the same place at the same time and working on the same things. And I understand that's not an easy sell, but know that even occasional pair coding can be tremendously beneficial for your teams, whether as a way to onboard new developers or to diffuse tribal knowledge throughout the team, increase your bus factor. perhaps as a force multiplier, allowing junior developers to easily leverage the knowledge and experience of those more senior. Your teams should be pairing in at least some fashion. Now, if you're unable to introduce even occasional pairing to your team, perhaps your local user group is an excellent place to start. Pair programming night is a fantastic recurring activity for a user group. What about open source collaborators? I am sure that there are people who contribute regularly to the same projects that you do who would be thrilled with the idea of remote pairing on a feature or two, if only it was suggested. Perhaps approach someone here about pairing during the conference's hackathon. Marcelo Jacobus even posted an invitation to pair, open invitation, on phpmentoring.org. I don't know Marcelo, but Marcelo gets it. There is power in pairs. Now, if you're unable to pair with a colleague, perhaps the next best thing is to engage in regular code review. I'm sure that most of you have some sort of code review process in the workplace. But how many of you engage in regular code review outside of the workplace? I ask that question a lot, and I find that it's a very, very small percentage. Think about it for a moment. Our employers are more heavily invested in code review than we are. I'm not entirely surprised. The fallacy of viewing code review merely as a mechanism for enforcing coding standards or protecting the build is a common one. The fact of the matter, however, is that those are at best tangential benefits to the practice of code review. Yeah. The primary beneficiary of code review is the coder rather than the code. And if you're not engaging in regular code review, both inside and outside the workplace, you're missing an excellent opportunity for growth. Both the process of having your code reviewed by a peer and by reviewing another's code regularly offers considerable leverage in terms of growing your tactical skills as a developer. Find a code review buddy. Offer to review the code of someone else if they'll return the favor. Approach someone in your local user group, someone who contributes to the same open source projects that you do, someone you know from an IRC chat room, wherever. My friend Yitzchock, he recently even went so far as to tweet an open offer to review other people's code. Yitz gets it. He recognizes that code review benefits the reviewer as much as the reviewee. And he took the initiative to put himself in a place where he would be able to engage in more of it. Side projects, another fantastic opportunity to leverage your peer relationships to foster your growth. The next time you begin a side project, resist the urge to work on it alone or to invite contributions from the greater community. Instead, invite just one or two others to work with you closely on it. Perhaps form a learning group with a few of your peers. My friend Jeff Caruth, co-host of the Loosely Coupled podcast, is currently organizing the second iteration of the Dev Book Club, a bi-monthly discussion focused on key software texts using Google Hangouts. It's been a tremendous learning experience for everyone involved in the group. Jeff gets it. And these groups, they needn't even be ongoing. My friend Sean McCool, over the past few months, has initiated a number of ad hoc, topic-focused hangouts, very much like the open spaces gatherings at conferences. Sean gets it. And know that the power of peers, it's not limited to learning. My friend Lee Tengham, the author of the excellent 11k.io newsletter, he looked to leverage a peer relationship for accountability. Lee gets it. possibilities, they're literally endless. But it all begins with your viewing your peers as valuable resources. The Talmudic sage, Rabbi Hanina, reflects, Harbe lo marati me rabbeisai. Much have I learned from my mentors. Umi chaverai, yoiser me rabbeisai. And more from my colleagues than from my mentors. Umi talmidai, yoiser me kulon. And from my students, more than all of them. Here, the sage recognizes the benefit of both cultivating a mentor and of acquiring a colleague, but suggests that even more empowering is sharing your knowledge with others. Look familiar? Every one of you should be listed at phpmentoring.org and actively looking for an apprentice. Not because it's a great way to give back to the community. It is. But more because it'll impact your growth as positively as it does that of your apprentice. See, the Talmud instructs the teacher, Chanek lunar al pi darchai. Teach the student according to their way. If one wishes to truly reach a student, to make a connection, perforce, they must speak in the student's vernacular. Now, the wisdom here isn't merely prescriptive, but descriptive as well. The process of teaching another causes you to view the material as they would, which opens your mind to new insights and greater understanding. And don't think that you've got nothing to offer an apprentice. Know that by being here today at an international PHP conference, by attending this session, you are the 1%. The people you see and interact with here this weekend, and I'm talking about attendees as well as presenters, they're not the PHP community. They are the leaders of the PHP community. And that includes each and every one of you. You know far more than you think you know. And sharing that knowledge with others will advance your knowledge even further. Now, if formal mentoring isn't for you, perhaps invite a junior developer to work closely with you on a side project. Maybe prepare a presentation for your local user group. Submit it to a conference. You'd be amazed how much you gain simply from the process of preparation. My friend Eric Hogue tweeted this a few months ago about the amazing side benefit of growing his own understanding while preparing a talk for November's True North PHP. Eric gets it. If public speaking isn't your thing, consider writing instead. The same phenomena exists. You will be the primary beneficiary of the process. Submit an article to PHP Architect. Start a blog. If you have a blog, blog more. Even put some ideas together in a GitHub gist and share it publicly for discussion. If you're ambitious, write a book. Yeah. My friend Matt Frost, the other co-host of the Loosely Coupled podcast, he recently completed work on a book on OAuth. And Matt would tell you, he'd be the first to tell you, that he was not an OAuth guru when he started, nor was he a writer. Today, 10 months later, he's both. Matt gets it. The possibilities are limited only by your creativity and your inhibitions. Learn from your mentors and your colleagues, but grow the most by sharing your knowledge with others. The Talmud takes the existence of a vibrant community pretty much for granted, even going so far as to suggest that real learning doesn't exist ele bichabura, but as part of a group. The sage Shimon ben Zoyma taught, Ezehu chacham, haloimid mikol adam. Who is wise? One who learns from everyone. This is another maxim which is both descriptive as well as prescriptive. It's traditionally understood as a prescription to view everyone you encounter as having something to contribute. And that's incredible advice on its own. But I think that it can also be understood as a description of the wise approach to knowledge acquisition. Crowdsourcing, learning from everyone. You're already at a conference. That's a big one. If this is your first conference, congratulations. Soak it up and come again. If you regularly attend, bravo, keep it up. You likely already understand their benefit. Conferences, they allow you to stay abreast of new tools and technologies for an investment of days instead of weeks or months, which gives you more time to focus on growing your skills in the areas most immediately relevant, while still staying ahead of that incredible pace of change in our industry. Now, regarding conferences, don't overlook the value of the hallway track. The sessions are fantastic. I mean, look at the lineup this week. But the ability to cross-pollinate with such a wide cross-section of the community should not be underestimated, nor should it be missed. Similar in many ways are your local user groups. While the cross-section may not be as large, they still serve to expand your ecosystem. And their repetitive nature allows you to form significant relationships with other developers more quickly. Now, what if you don't have a local user group? So the simple answer, start one. I recently launched a group in New Jersey called Shore PHP. People often ask why I did it. The answer is pretty simple. We had no local user group. Cal Evans told me to. In following Cal's advice, I fulfilled the Talmud's directive, "B'makom she'ein anoshim liyistadel liyois ish." In a place where there is nobody, endeavor to be somebody. Cal Evans gets it. As a community person, he innately understands that the more one interacts with the community, the more one gives to the community, the more one receives in return. Let's not forget open source. If you're not contributing to open source, you are doing yourself a disservice. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The open source community does not need any single developer. But every single developer, professional developer, needs the open source community. Yeah. Developing software with a large group of your peers, it's a transformative experience. And as professional developers, you need to be a part of it. The Talmud's wisdom regarding community is pretty straightforward. It admonishes us, al tifrosh min hatzibur. Do not separate yourself from the community. The Talmud recognizes that the community is your lifeline and that without it, you're lost. Finally, let's consider the individual. The Talmud tells the story of Rabbi Akiva, who after being away from home for 12 years to learn in a distant yeshiva, he returns along with several of his students. When they reach the porch of his home, he overhears his wife answering someone who had questioned her judgment in allowing him to be gone for so long in pursuit of his studies. If it were up to me, she says proudly, he could stay another 12 years. The Talmud relates that upon hearing this, Rabbi Akiva and his students, they immediately returned to the distant yeshiva, and they stayed, immersed in their learning for an additional 12 years. Now, if you're following, there's an obvious question here. The question is famously asked. He had traveled so far after being away so long. I mean, he couldn't stop in for a visit? The insightful answer is that according to Talmudic arithmetic, the growth of 12 and 12, it's not the same. It doesn't compare to the growth of 24. the Talmud's perspective on growth and understanding. And that's really one of the things that we're aiming for when we talk about our growth as software developers. Not simply growing our knowledge or our skills, but growing our understanding is that retention is a myth. Understanding which is nurtured grows, and understanding which is neglected withers. And that's Rabbi Akiva's logic. Traveling with his students, at that point, he's immersed in learning right up until the moment that he overhears his wife. And at that moment, he can either return and continue his growth or stay and regress. Now, for professional software developers, this means always be coding. There's really no way of escaping it. To grow our craft, we have to practice our craft. We have to do it a lot. We have to do it consistently. My friend Joe Kazia-Kenas gets it. He recently extended his personal unbroken streak of coding every day to 500 days. Now, that's not going to work for all of us. Sometimes you just need a break. But Joe gets it. Consistency is the key to growth. Rabbi Akiva's logic, it also applies to maintaining context. For context is really just micro-consistency. We're all aware of the impact of context switching and interruption on our productivity. In the workplace, we get really creative. We set aside coding-only hours. I know people who actually, in large buildings, they work away from their desks to avoid interruption. We have social media blackout periods, private offices, noise-canceling headphones. Ask yourself a question. Does your coding at home resemble your coding in the workplace in terms of isolating yourself from distraction? Just as an athlete builds muscle memory through repetition with proper form, we build mental muscle memory every time we code. So if you want to grow your ability to maintain context and focus while coding professionally, be as diligent about it when coding casually. Your vacational coding habits should resemble your vocational coding habits if you wish them to be strengthened. Aside from rigorous analysis, the most salient features, perhaps, of Talmudic methodology can be summed up in two words: verbalized repetition. We'll start with verbalization. The application is simple. Good developers talk to themselves. Verbalization, it involves different parts of the brain than thought. So the process of rubber ducking an understanding which was previously entirely mental necessarily increases that understanding. It's not an issue of, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. No. Rather, by explaining it, you come to understand it better. And by rubber ducking regularly, we also gain one of the primary benefits of pair coding, even when coding alone. I found that verbalization also improves concentration. If I'm having difficulty maintaining focus or context, I'll actually narrate as I code. I do my best Jeffrey Way impersonation, and I describe every line of code as I write it. Fortunately, I work at home. I really should do that all the time, because my focus improves, and the quality of my code improves as well, as I gain additional clarity and insight from the process of verbalization. Another great strategy, which works very similarly, preemptive commit messages. Writing your commit message prior to beginning coding. You'll find that your solutions are cleaner and your commits more granular by adopting that one very, very simple practice. I've also found that being disciplined about diagramming solutions, even the simplest solutions, prior to their implementation, has an observable impact on the quality of my code. You simply cannot use the whiteboard enough. Don't think, however, that verbalization is a tool only to help you plan solutions or work through challenges. Do an experiment. For an entire afternoon, every time you're about to commit code, did you see what I did there? Entire afternoon, every time you're about to commit code. The implication being that we're committing code multiple times in an afternoon. Yeah, granular commits is really key. But every time you're about to commit code, rubber duck first. Explain your implementation to yourself as you would to a teammate. Not only will the other members of the team love you because your commit messages will actually be descriptive and meaningful, but you'll be shocked how frequently the exercise causes you to take your finger off the proverbial trigger, to go back and reconsider and improve your code prior to making the commit. A similar practice, which can dramatically improve the quality of your code, is to be disciplined about reviewing a diff prior to each commit. And I don't mean just looking for debugging messages and coding standards. Reviewing your changes file by file, and rubber ducking them. Doing it file by file rather than in their logical context, it serves as a tremendous sanity check on our implementation. It almost magically removes blind spots that you may have been unaware of along the way. It's like a one-person code review. Now, regarding repetition, the Talmud observes, Eina doima shana pirku mea l'shana pirku mea ve'echad. One who reviews their learning 101 times cannot be compared to one who reviews their learning only 100 times. Now, obviously, the Talmud doesn't consider repetition to be about retention. The one who reviewed their learning 100 times certainly retained it. Rather about increased insight and understanding. And an application for us as software developers is code katas. For the professional software developer, katas are akin to a musician rehearsing or a baseball player taking batting practice, as they offer us, I think, our only real opportunity to practice our craft, unfettered from external influence from the project, stakeholders, deadlines, or in our own projects, our vision for the next feature. Their focus on process, the analysis and decision-making used to arrive at a solution, is invaluable, and it's something that really cannot be experienced any other way. I don't yet know Johann Broadwell, but Johann gets it. Coding katas as the programmer equivalent of push-ups. The sage Hillel is oft quoted, Lo habaishin loimed, the timid does not learn. To get where you want to go as a developer, to get where you ought to want to go as a developer, and to get there quickly takes a little chutzpah. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to fail. Ultimately, we are responsible for our own growth. So it's imperative not to allow our inhibitions to slow our advance. The timid does not learn. The Talmud relates the story of another story of Rabbi Akiva, how he was inspired to begin his studies at what was considered then the advanced age of 40, when he encountered a large boulder with a hole drilled through its entirety by the steady drip of water from an overhang. Rabbi Akiva learned from this the value of small beginnings, and that steady effort, no matter how limited, can accomplish great things. The Talmud observes that Kol hascholios kashos, all beginnings are difficult. The antidote to difficult beginnings is to recognize that even small beginnings have value, and that steady effort can overcome even the most imposing obstacle. Confession time. This is my first open source contribution. Yeah, a grammar and style edit to PHP the right way. small beginnings. Our growth as software developers should be understood and approached as we approach software development, as an iterative process, best measured over time. It's not easy, but as the Talmud observes, lefum tzara agra, according to the difficulty is the reward. I'll leave you this morning with the words of the sage Hillel in 3 parts. Im ein li, mi li. If I'm not for myself, who else will be for me? Know that it takes chutzpah to avoid the fate of the timid, that you have to ask questions and ask for help, question assumptions and risk failure, to value small beginnings, to practice as you wish to perform, and to leverage consistency. You need to keep in mind the benefits of rubber ducking and other verbalization techniques, of coding katas, and of cultivating mentors. Hillel continues, Ukasha'ani la'atzmi, ma'ani. If I'm only for myself, what am I? It's imperative to interact with the community, to value learning together with our peers, pair coding and code review, conferences and user groups, sharing our knowledge with others, and stepping up to fill a void. As my time is drawn to a close, I hope that each of you have been able to glean something that you can take away and implement immediately, such that the time that we've spent together here this morning can accelerate your growth as a software developer. For that's it. That's all I've got. I've done what I can do. The rest is up to you. So I'll conclude, as did Hillel, by asking, Im lo yakshov emasai. If not now, when? Thank you.